Game number 2 on Attacking Chess is a game between Magnus Carlsen and Topalov. We are already in the year 2012, so at this moment Magnus has been already the world number 1. Still, it is a very complex game and actually a crazy game because Magnus starting the attack out of nowhere. We have more or less a normal position. Magnus starts to sacrifice. The things are getting extremely complex and they remain complex for very long time, and finally it all ends in an endgame, which is better for Magnus Carlsen. Even we have very strange consideration of pieces. Magnus will have a queen versus rook and a pair of bishops, so very complex position. And of course, having an amazing technique, Magnus is converting this advantage quite easily to a full point. Still, for us, what is the most important here is the middle game part, where out of nowhere, Magnus Carlsen is being extremely inventive and with a great idea, he starts to go for his opponent's king. Very beautiful game and very interesting one as well, because Topalov defended himself so well, and till move 40-45, the game been very uncertain. All right. So we begin with the move e4. So we have Sicilian, once again, bishop b5. Magnus, he always liked this move, bishop to b5. We do remember his game against, for example, Vichy Anand with his brilliant positional victory. Knight d7 played by Topalov. Topalov played mainly knight d7. Of course, bishop d7 is as well one of the main moves. So knight d7, c3. Knight f6, queen e2, quite a rare line for white. It is not that often played. Even currently, we see just few games on that. a6, bishop a4, queen c7, short castle, and we have this kind of Spanish pawn structures. It's a bit strange because we have the queen on c7 and the white queen on e2. Of course, in the Spanish structures, queen is never being placed on e2. We have the queen on d1, then we have this rook e1, and the knight from b1 is going f1, g3. So there are some small differences, but from the structure point of view, we are in the Spanish game. C takes d4, played by Topalov. Probably he did not want Magnus to play d5. Next, even I believe that black's position should be fine. So, for example, bishop e7, d5. I do not believe too much that really black should be worried about that. We have bishop on c8, which is a good thing because usually the bishop is on b7. And with the bishop on b7, usually we have nothing better than to go back on c8 because the bishop belongs to d7 in this pawn structures, not to b7. Now we have the bishop on c8, so this is a nice thing, and I guess black could just try to play normal, and to my opinion, the position is very playable for black. But he's taking on d4, and this of course gives opportunity to white to develop the knight to c3. It is quite important that the white knight is on c3 and not on d2 somewhere. Knight c3 is taking a beautiful position. We have short castle played and bishop g5. Quite an interesting idea by Magnus because he's going to g5, h4. It is not very typical because usually we try not to put the bishop on h4. On the other hand, now somewhere we might be very fast with the move rook c1 and knight d5. So the things are very unclear. h6 being played, of course, bishop h4, bishop b7. Now we have the move rook ad1, and very interesting moment because rook ad1, it feels a little bit strange because usually we put one rook to c1 and one rook to d1, but the rook from f to d1, not from a. Very interesting play by Magnus because he has something very deep in mind, but of course for us, it's a tough move to make rook ad1, and I would not advise you in general cases to play rook ad1 because the other rook belongs to d1 and this one to c1. In this particular position, rook ad1 is of course very interesting, but a hard move to make. Rook ac8 by Topalov, bishop to b3. So the bishop is taking a very nice position on b3. Rook fe8, another positional decision of Topalov, a nice and solid play by black. And Magnus is starting something very interesting. So he's taking on e5 because probably he'd been worried that maybe black might take on d4 and then the rook is standing against the queen on e2, which might be quite dangerous for white. So d takes e, and he's playing the move bishop to g3. Bishop g3 is made usually to have this idea of playing knight h4 and knight g6 or knight f5 because we have the strong bishop on b3. So bishop on b3 supports this knight to h4. On the other hand, as well, bishop g3 is preventing black from playing knight to c5. A multifunctional move, bishop g3. We have bishop f8 played by Topalov. What could be more natural? Now the rook is protecting the pawn e5, and Magnus Carlsen goes in his typical style, h3. A calm move in a very complex position. This is what Magnus is doing again and again. So as well here we see this move h3. So he's provoking his opponents into doing something. H3, of course, is a useful move, but is it the most useful move in the position? This is, of course, questionable. The next move of Topalov, knight b6. I guess knight b6 idea is pretty normal because the knight is going now to c4. First of all, black knight is going to block the bishop on b3. Secondary, knight takes b2 might be a threat somewhere. Instead of knight to b6, of course, black could have tried moves as knight to h5, but knight h5 it gives a lot of opportunities to white. So, for example, we're having the move knight to g5, and we see the bishop from b3 is getting into the game. So, knight h5 is just too risky. Knight b6 being played. Knight h4 now by Magnus Carlsen. Knight h4 is something that we could expect, but the things are getting now extremely complex. Knight c4 with a threat of taking on b2 next. And here is the beginning of something very special. Magnus Carlsen is not paying attention to the pawn b2, and it looks strange because knight b2 is just, looks like a very serious threat. Still, Magnus is trying to mate the black king out of nothing, basically, because at the moment everything is closed. So knight f5, very, very beautiful move, but you must be calculating the things so precisely to even consider something like knight f5, because the question is, of course, knight takes b2, and what's next? The rook is hanging on d1, the knight is hanging now on c3, so all that is looking just so strange. But the key idea we see by the next move of white, and it is to play bishop h4. Just incredible idea. Knight f5 and a calm move as bishop h4. The idea of bishop h4 is simple. We want to take next bishop takes f6. In case a knight goes somewhere, we might have the move knight to d5. So there is no good square to go from f6 for the knight, and Topalov, being a very principled player, Topalov really trusted in his calculation, and that's why he became as well the world champion. Topalov been for a very, very long time in the top 5 of the world. Very, very good player. We do still remember how, for example, he crushed his candidates. He started with 5.5 out of 6. Incredible result. Trusting in his calculation, Topalov proceeds with knight takes d1. Very normal, very logical. Next move of white, bishop takes f6. So this has been the key idea of Magnus, to take on f6. Now we have this queen g4 coming next. Black needs to take a difficult decision, because how to avoid queen g4? Not easy. In case of g takes f6, we have now a very interesting position. So g takes f6. White is having now several choices, so we have this idea of queen g4. But the question is, should we give a check immediately, or should we wait with it for a while? For example, we can take first rook to d1. The position is very, very interesting. Knight on f5, huge piece. And in case of queen c3, now we have the queen g4 check. King needs to go to h8. And we have this bishop takes f7 with a threat of queen to g8 next. And it seems like white is winning. So this positional move rook takes d1 seems like to bring a big advantage to white, because we have the idea of rook d3, rook g3, but still a very interesting position. This is why after bishop takes f6, Topalov is taking knight takes c3, and we have the move queen g4 being made. Is there any defense for black? The idea of white, of course, to take on g7, this is number 1. To take on h6, this is number 2. Not an easy task for Topalov to avoid all these mating threats around the black king, but Topalov had something very interesting in mind, and he's taking with a bishop on e4, so the position remains super complex. Magnus Carlsen, after bishop takes e4, he takes on h6, and this seems to be the best, because what else to do? Knight h6 seems to be the only real option in the position. King h7, and here comes bishop takes f7. Still, the position is just so complex. Of course, white wants to mate now with bishop g8. King takes h6 and queen to g5 mate. So there are serious mating threats. On the other hand, well, maybe there could be as well some defense. After a very long thought, Topalov took queen takes f7. So he found nothing better than to take queen f7, but still the position remains very unclear after queen takes f7. Yes, he had some other options as well, but queen f7 from human point of view, it looks the best, because first of all, there is no mate anymore, and from the human point of view, you think that the position is quite unclear after the move queen takes f7, so you might be even better with the black pieces. So queen f7, very natural reaction by Topalov, knight takes f7 and g takes f6. So let us take a fresh look at the position. From the material point of view, black is doing better, because black is having 2 pieces, so bishop pair plus a rook against the queen of white. So material, better for black. On the other hand, black king is open, so white is having a chance to proceed with a dynamic play. Maybe something could happen, because to have always open king versus the queen and knight, usually white should have something. And Magnus Carlsen is not wasting any time. He's playing directly the move f4. Very, very nice play. So he's bringing his rook into the attack. He's threatening to take f takes e next. We see that rook from f1 is joining the action. Topalov finds nothing better than play bishop g6. But after bishop g6, there is an opportunity for Magnus Carlsen. Queen h4 check, king g7, and f takes e5. As we see, queen take f6 is coming next. So knight e4 being played by Topalov. He's trying to defend the pawn f6 as much as he can. And again, Magnus is playing great. Rook takes f6. Bishop c5 check. King h2, knight takes f6. Still, the things are far from obvious. Queen takes f6 and king h7. On one hand, yes, it feels like white should be doing better. On the other hand, black is having now a huge material advantage. So Magnus Carlsen needs to proceed to be very, very precise. We have the move knight g5 being played. King h6 is forced. And beautiful move knight e6. So now we have double threat of playing queen to g7 and queen to g5, and as well, of course, queen h4 is possible in case needed. Black needs to take on e6 and queen takes e6. So once again, we have to take a fresh look, because there have been so many changes. Now we have the position where white is having a queen versus bishop pair plus rook, and white has 3 pawns. The a6 pawn is going to fall most probably, because the rook is hanging now on c8 as well. And from the material point of view, white is doing better. And as well, from the practical point of view, white is doing definitely better, because the black king is still open. It is very difficult to play with an open king against the white queen, because there are checks coming from everywhere. So by now, we can say that, yes, white is doing better. How much better? Well, the future will show. Rook to e8, very natural. Queen f6, great position for the white queen. We have all the time this check on h4 in case it is needed. Topalov finds nothing better than bishop e7, but I think it's not the most precise defense. He could have done something better, but to the position of black, of course, it is not simple. So bishop e7 and very cool. Queen takes a6. Nice move. b4. Topalov is trying to protect at least the b pawn. We have queen c4, bishop f8, and the move g4, because of course the pawn on e5 cannot be taken because of queen f4 check. So king h7 and e6. e6 pawn cannot be attacked because of the g4 move, so there is no bishop f5, and still all these checks around the black king are dangerous. We have the move bishop d6 check, king to g2. The winning idea of white, of course, is connected to move the pawn h, then to pawn g towards the black king. And in fact, it is so difficult for black to do something about it because the king is just too open. In case black would manage somehow to win the pawn e6, yes, this would turn the things around, but it is very, very difficult to win the e6 pawn. Let us check the last moves of the game. We have bishop e7 played to prevent white from playing h4. Queen c7 with a threat of playing h4. King to g8, king to g3. So no more check on d6, and h4 is coming next. King f8, first check on f4 and check on d4. Finally, we have the move h4 being played. As we can see, Magnus Carlsen continues to be very precise, but here we are more in the technical part of the game, and as we all know, Magnus is so precise when it comes to converting his advantage. So white is doing obviously much better here. Rook d8, queen to c4. Queen is taking a nice position on c4, bishop to d3. Queen c6, bishop to b1. It's time to play h5. Bishop takes a2. Topalov is really trying to give his best. He's trying to search for some chances. But unluckily to him, there are no chances. Queen e4, very nice. The queen is getting to g6. King h8, h6. Mating threat. Queen e5 check and queen g7. Bishop f6. Now we have the move e7 coming. Rook e8 is a must, and another beautiful move by Magnus. Queen f4, very, very precise. In case of bishop takes e7, now we have queen e5 check and queen g7 mate. So the bishop from f6 has no squares to go. Topalov is trying with bishop to g7, but well, the position of obviously is completely lost. g5 followed by queen f6. King g8 and queen f6. It is game over. A very beautiful win of Magnus Carlsen, but of course the game been super complex. Our main attention should go to this beautiful idea of playing knight f5 and bishop h4. Just give me a second to find it. All right, here we go. So knight to h4, knight c4, and here the whole action just begins. Knight f5, knight takes b2, and this amazing move bishop to h4. Maybe Topalov could have defended better, but this is not the point for us. For us, it is a point to learn this beautiful ideas, beautiful mating ideas. Knight f5, bishop h4, very, very original play by Magnus, because something like that I think I never saw before. Just to give away the rook on d1, knight c3 is hanging, and still you're going for the black king with bishop f6 and queen g4. All these heavy threats around the black king, it makes it look just so dangerous for black. Still, of course, the position is far from obvious, and Topalov defends himself very, very well. As well, this position is, let's say, far from clear, but this is not the whole point of our conversation. So we checked the beautiful idea, knight f5 followed by bishop h4 and queen g4. Finally, Magnus Carlsen managed to win the game. So what ends well is good. Let us go to the game number 3.